Welcome to this episode of the Down the Pub podcast. On this episode, we are joined by Wanderers president Derek Martin. It's been the off season hasn't felt that long this time around, so it's kind of it feels like everything's kind of coming along quickly because the boys are back in town. So, Derek, I guess my
Yeah.
hope you're well. But my first question for you is like, what does an off season look like for you? I think everybody thinks that in football, you guys are like teachers and you get like 3 or 4 months off, and you just go down to the Dominican for a few months and chill out. So, what does an off season look like for a president?
Yeah, I often say the off season's actually when I'm the busiest. Once the season starts, I don't really have much I can do to impact, how things are going. All of the decisions have been made. Obviously there's a few things you can do to adjust. Maybe there's injuries, maybe there's, a little bit of money you've left in the cap that you can bring in a late season addition. But from a business standpoint, much of what we do is done really at the end of the season. And then, by now we've pretty much secured, all of our corporate sponsors and we've put together our schedule, which, will come out on Wednesday of this week. And we've already started planning then what each of those games looks like from a theme standpoint and what we're trying to achieve and do. So it's busy, busy, busy from kind of the towards the end of the season until now. And then now that the players are here and the guys have started on the pitch, I don't have Patrice in my office bugging me all the time, so I can get a little bit more work done. And now they're off and to the races. So it's a really exciting time for everybody, and we're really excited. Obviously, I think the beauty of sports is that every year you start anew, and you go into it with optimism and excitement about what you've been able to do and add, and this year is no different for us.
So, we've obviously made quite a lot of changes in the backroom staff, more than I guess the playing staff. We've seen like two assistant coaches leave. We've Mark Watson's come in, and things like that. So, was there something that happened last year that you decided that you needed to kind of reinforce the backroom staff and bring new people in?
Well, listen, I think every year you're trying to find that chemistry that leads to a successful season. And it's always difficult to look back on a year that didn't go the way you wanted, and try to pinpoint, where it went wrong. And it's not to place blame on any one individual or, any one instance or situation, but when you do a good, thorough debrief at the end of a season and you start going through all the things that could have helped lead to why some things didn't go the way you wanted them to go. That leads to some changes, and I think the backroom staff, obviously, like with players, in the CPL. We're developing coaches as much as we're developing players. And, you can see a guy like Jordy working with Pat for years and years and years. And sometimes those relationships run their course, and it's time for Jordy to go on his own and do his own thing. And then you look at a guy like Jed, who we brought in here knowing he was a talented individual that was just looking for some more opportunities, and then he falls in love with the East Coast, and an opportunity pops up at UPEI, and he gets to go fulfill a dream of his to be a head coach, not just of one team, but now he's a head coach of two teams. And why would you ever want to stand in the way of somebody doing that? So, there's different situations in each case, but at the end of the day, we're as happy when coaches can move on and do interesting things after their time with the Wanderers as we are when players can do that. And, we're excited about bringing in Gio and, what he's going to bring to the coaching staff, being a very, very different coach than Jordy was or is, and being a very defensive minded, focused coach who can hopefully balance off Patrice's very offensive focused mind, and with Jan still in the mix, who's been a real rock for us and a lifer almost as much, just like Rampy has been we feel like we've got a solid group, and then you add in Mark Watson, obviously, who brings a ton of MLS experience, and it's hopefully a group that can gel really well together and give the players what they need to be successful.
Chris Sale's obviously here with us. Gary took the night off as he's quite lazy. So Chris, you've got a couple of
You
questions for
guys
Derek
have
there too.
upgraded.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, we thought we'd
yeah,
bring somebody in with a smoother
yeah.
voice.
Someone who knows
So.
a little bit more. It's good.
Goodness gracious. Gary's going to hear us or hear this and give us a good one after the fact. A question I actually had for you later on, Derek, but I suppose you kind of touched on it already, so it would be a good place to start. In terms of the timeline of the off season, I know at the end of last year, I saw you, we shared a big hug, and I remember the last thing you said to me was work starts tomorrow. In regards to that timeline, when do you begin to build that timeline for the off season? Is it in September, October? Is it something where you don't really jump the gun because you don't know how the season's going to end? I know there's different facets of the club that you're focused on specifically, and you also delegate different facets of the club as well to other people. But in terms of that off season, when does that timeline preparation begin for you?
Yeah, I'd say it's an ongoing process. Like at the end of the day, we were frustrated and disappointed after the first 6 games of last season. Um, so there were concerns right out of the gate around how the specific group we had put together last year, for whatever reason, just wasn't gelling and wasn't meshing. And, it was obvious to the fans. I would hope the fans appreciate that we are as in tune and likely much more in tune with what's going on than everybody else. So, what you guys see, we see amplified much, much more. And, there was obviously something missing. There was just something that wasn't working. We saw it in our preseason. And we were hoping that it would solve itself and work itself out, as sometimes these things do, but it never did. And we were just kind of behind the eight ball from the very beginning of the year. And I give the guys credit. They never gave up. Um, I was really impressed. It was one of the things I said to them at the end of the season, that there were plenty of excuses for a lot of guys on that team to just mail it um, in the second half of the season, and they didn't. They played hard and they competed, and they managed to salvage something at the end of the year that kept it from being a disaster of a season, as it kind of started out like it could be, like it looked like it could be at the beginning. So, I guess the long way to answer your question, Chris, is, the work started during the season, midway of the season. I started having conversations with Mark Watson in August. It was, hey, we need to fix something. There's something not working. We can't wait until November to address it. We've got to work on it now. We got Mark out to the final home game in Halifax so he could see it, he could meet everybody. And what I said to you that night was true. We literally met the next morning at 8 a.m. and spent 3 days together. Patrice, Matt, Mark, and I, 3 days in a row. Kind of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, diving into everything that had happened, that had transpired, evaluating every single player on the roster, evaluating every single member of the coaching staff, evaluating our travel schedule, evaluating our preseason, evaluating every single piece of the puzzle. Um, and, we hope that we found some things that we were able to change that can help us get off to a better start and sustain success throughout a season, so that we get to an end point where, we're the ones playing in a game in Mexico next February.
It would be nice.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
would.
So just kind of just touch on a little bit there of with the people moving. Like Jed was obviously a big part of the underage setup here in Halifax. He was a big help, I think, in bringing that program forward. So with him leaving, who steps up to make sure that we're kind of keeping that system going? Because it's like I think everybody enjoyed the games last year. Like we brought some good teams over to play against the lads and stuff like that. So who's going to step up and look after the underage teams?
Yeah, well, listen, I think Matt Fegan, that's his thing. So I think, I think a lot of people don't understand what his job is. But his job is to be in charge of football development for our club. And, Matt's not the guy out there deciding every player and deciding, who comes in. Like that's Patrice's job. Patrice's job with Mark's help, he's ultimately responsible for how we perform on the pitch. He's responsible for the guys he wants to bring in. He's getting help. He's getting support. He's getting all of those things. But Matt's there to, help make sure the contracts all abide by the rules of the CPL and that we fit under our salary cap. But at the end of the day, his main responsibility is to help us grow the game in Nova Scotia. And, everything around the youth summer series, the under 21 team, the forays we're making into U18, U15, the bigger plans we have. Right now, we've got Dan Clark, who works for us, who's doing a great job out visiting junior highs all over HRM, just promoting soccer, getting kids into the sport. These are all the things that fall under Matt's purview. And he's done a fantastic job. And, all of that work continues, and we're, going to be announcing it very soon. But we will have a summer series again this year. We will have a series of games all across Atlantic Canada. We will have two teams from Great Britain, I'll say. I won't specifically say England. But we do have two clubs that are coming over that will play our youth team, our under 21 team, and we see it as an incredibly important part of our development pathway. I think you guys know we've been trying to get League One Atlantic up and running for years now. It's incredibly frustrating. It's difficult. It's hard to make it work. So while we wait and continue to work on it, we don't want to just not do anything. So, we've come up with this series of games and events that, again, fit a little bit more into my skill set. I know how to put on an event. I know how to kind of create some excitement, and with then Matt's work, trying to work on how we work with different clubs, different coaches, different folks to pull all that off in a successful way for development. We think we've found a solution that works for us, and I really think that's something everybody has to understand. It's every market is different. Every city's different. Every province is different. What works in Ontario isn't necessarily going to work here. What works here isn't going to work in BC. And we're still pretty young at this, and trying to. Sometimes we fall flat on our face, but we try stuff, and the things that work, we try to do more of. The things that don't work, we try to pivot and do it differently. But we're trying to find our way here and figure out what's best for Atlantic Canada and what's best for the Halifax Wanderers.
So Celtic and Rangers summer series coming up.
That'd be something.
Go ahead, Chris.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.
Derek pulled the wrestling kayfabe there. He had the eyebrows up. Stay tuned. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that. Back to
You thought you'd like that.
back to Pints with Patrice last year, brother. It was an event, a lot of hype, a lot of excitement. The season may not have matched the expectation, but as an overall, I think that night was a really good compass for not only just the immediate future of the club, but years to come. I heard a lot from yourself that really it motivated me and encouraged me for the future of the club, more or less, because I think we know after year 4, year 5, year 6, there were questions about the future of not the club as much as the league, the stability of things. We're doing great here, but they're not doing so great in other markets. What's the motivation aspect for you now? Is it more application? I know, like, you don't come from soccer professionally as a background. Are you still learning every day? I know it seems like a silly question. You probably are, but how much of it is now the application of what you've learned over the last 7, 8 years? And how much of it is you're still learning every day? You're still trying to find ways to maneuver these corners. And, the big cherry on top of this question is the stadium. And I know that's been a thorn in your side, but it's also been a huge motivating factor for your drive with this club and your drive of being a part of our greater city and community as well. So I guess just to sum up the question, motivation wise, brother, what keeps you going as these last few months have gone by?
Yeah, not in a negative way, but it's the same thing that had me going when I started. And that's not to say we haven't accomplished anything. I think we've accomplished a lot, but the goals have remained the same. Uh, I'm a competitive guy, and I have said in the past that, and it very, very honestly, that this wasn't my sport when I got started, but I feel like I've watched a million games in the last 7 years now, and understand this sport better than anything. And I am desperate to win. Uh, and I'm desperate to win for the fans, for the city, for us, for the people that have toiled and put their heart and soul. Those that are still with us, those have had to move on and couldn't wait it out to get to that point. But it's something that really drives me, and uh, I'm not afraid to be in this position and know that it comes with lots of criticism and lots of questions, and lots of people think they can do it better or different, and that's fine. That's all part of it. But we work every single day to try to figure out how to get this team a championship and how to win a trophy. And that, maybe more than anything, I'd say for this offseason has been really the focus. I think the stadium piece continues to be the big picture of what we're trying to do, for the city and for the region. I do still believe 100% that it's going to happen and that we're in a good position for it to happen. It just takes a really long time. Um, and we're finally, I think, starting to help those that need to understand this, understand that it's an incredibly expensive thing to do to run this temporary stadium. And in business and in life, everything's about value, right? And it's not even the cost so much as how much we have to pay for what we get. um, is not a very good equation, because you as fans are stuck going to portable toilets and sitting on hard metal bleachers, and for the amount of money that we have to invest to get that, it would be so much smarter to make this longer term commitment, and for the same or maybe even less, we could be getting the appropriate stadium, not just for us but for the city, and for what we all would like to see and have as a great entertainment experience. And I do believe we're finally getting there. That there's an understanding now of that equation. And we've been pretty honest with the city that not to be dramatic, but this is not a tenable solution. Like, we cannot stay in this situation for much longer. So either they have to turn it over to us and let us do kind of what we want to do, or they have to invest in it, or else we're going to have to go figure something else out, because it's just not a viable long-term solution to be in a pop-up temporary stadium. Um, Especially when we're doing what we're doing, and we're bringing out sellout crowds over and over and over again, and supporting the local business community, and doing all of these great things. But we've almost made it too easy on the city, because we've just done it all. And it's just been out of sight, out of mind. They haven't had to worry about it, and we've said we're not going to do it anymore. So either you guys really are forced now to make a decision, and we'll see what comes of that.
You're not talking about relocating the team, are you?
I'm talking about the fact that it cannot stay the way it is.
Okay.
So, what, I don't know what everybody would expect us to do. They won't allow us to build our own stadium on the Wanderers grounds. They're not building a stadium on the Wanderers grounds. We've got to get to one of those two solutions in the next year and a half, or else we're going to have to really consider what we're going to do.
Okay. So people should keep the pressure on their elected officials to make sure that we have like a proper home to go and watch the team. So I just had a question, like, and I'm sure you've kind of, I know you try and stay away from social media, but obviously, with the all season players move around and stuff like that. And obviously we had, just speaking about teams out of Mexico, obviously we had Dan Nimick move to Ford on a free, and then we also had Masferrer move over to York. So is what's this? How do you guys like come about with? Because it's kind of a gamble when you sign somebody to a CPL contract because you're a lot of it's the unknown. So you're like when it comes to making the contracts, like how do you go about building them up so the club doesn't lose out on a top talent, but also just make sure that we're stuck on a contract where for 5 or 6, you see Manchester United now, like they've got like a bunch of players that they can't get rid of because they're on 5 or 6 year contracts. So how do you make that balance of making sure you're looking after the club's fortunes and also making sure that we're not losing out on transfer sales?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? You can't have it both ways. So this is the interesting thing about fans, and no matter what you do, someone's going to be upset. There's a player that someone doesn't like that you signed to a multi-year deal, and they're upset that you're bringing them back for another year. There's a player they do like that, you didn't sign to a multi-year deal that then is a free agent and can leave and do, what they want to do, and they're upset. So you have to really try with every player to, figure out what is in ideally the best interest of both. And again, we're the CPL. We're a league that was started to help the development of Canadian players. So we're not looking to trap anyone. We're not looking to hold anyone against their will to be here. Like, these guys are professionals. They're making a good salary. It's their full-time job. But at the end of the day, they're either in this because they have a future that they are, a kid like Tiago, who we have high hopes for and who's got the chance to move on and do something great. Um, or they're maybe at the other end of their career where they're, 25, 26, 27, as young as that is, to be talking about on the other end of the career. It's just the reality of professional sports, and they're figuring out, what the next step maybe is going to be after soccer and after they're done playing. So we're trying to always balance that all off, and like, to get into both of those situations, I'm happy to discuss them. Dan, great player. We were happy when he signed here the first year. He had a great season. Um, his rights were owned by the Vancouver Whitecaps in the MLS. That severely limited, what opportunities we had to move him. He committed to a 2-year deal. He got into the second year of the deal. He didn't have a great season last year. There's no ifs, ands, or buts around that. He really struggled. The weight of, I think, the pressure was a lot. He did his best. Again, these are young men who are doing the best they can to try to manage these expectations and these different asks that are being put on them. And it didn't work out. He didn't have a great year. And we had lots of talks. And back to Chris's question earlier, when does this stuff start happening? We started having conversations with Dan in August, September. What are you thinking? What are you thinking for next year? What do you want to do? And I think for Dan, it was as much of he needed to have a clean slate and try to, for his own career. And I usually talk to all these guys at the very beginning of the year. I don't talk to them a ton, but I'll go in and say hello and get a chance to make a small little speech. And the speech is always kind of the same thing. It's like, hey, you guys are professional athletes. You have a short career. You've got to make the best out of every year that you have to do this. And every year that we kick off a season is a moment in time that will never be replicated, right? You will never have the exact same group of teammates that you have now for this year. You'll never have the exact same situation. It will always change. That's true at every level of sport, in every sport around the world. And I think, people have to remember that is this is a moment in time. They have short careers. They need to do what's best for them. And, Dan was good. He was honest with us. And he said, listen, guys, I think I need to explore going somewhere else. He wanted to go to the US. He had played his university soccer in the US. His girlfriend lives in the US. He wanted to go explore that. And we said, okay, do it. Like, do what's best for you. And as great of a player as you are, we'll be here. And go see what you can do. And then when we got to the end of the season, we were all a little bit down about it. And, Dan was adamant that he was going to move on. And we said, okay. And we couldn't wait and leave ourselves in a position where we didn't have anybody. But we were honest, and we said that to him. We said, okay, no problem. If that's what you want to do, we're sorry to see that happen, but we'll have to move on and take care of ourselves and make sure we have a player next year that can fill that space. And we went out and got what we thought was the number one free agent in the CPL, in Thomas, in TMG, and felt really good about it. Felt fantastic that in many ways he could be what we needed a little bit more than what Dan was. And that's not to take away from Dan's skill, and his talent, but in terms of our defensive structure, that was where we really fell apart last year. And that was one of the things we really analyzed in those 3 days after the season, to say we had some defenders that were very offensive minded, which left us susceptible, on the defensive end. And we wanted to fix that. So we brought in a really solid defender in TMG, and that was that. And then, for many reasons, Dan's opportunities down south didn't work out, and he called us, when he was looking to come back to the CPL, and we said, we've already moved on. We've kind of solved that position. So there isn't a starting position nor a salary cap space available for you. Good luck, and he obviously found a place because he's talented, and that's good for him that he found a place, and we're happy for him. We'll want to beat him when we play him. But
Of course.
don't forget the human side of this, right? Like, as a human, we want the best for Dan, and hopefully this works out for him. Off you go. And then you look at Massimo, and very similar. We looked at the situation with Mass, and we can get into it a little bit if you guys want to talk about roster composition a little bit later. But one of the key things for us, last year, again, when we analyzed it, is Patrice plays a very defined system. It's very unique. It's a 3-box-3. The positions that he looks for are different than what you guys would play on Football Manager or somewhere else. You don't need 4 at the back. You don't play with 2 fullbacks that bomb up and down the lines. That's not how he sets up his team. And we brought in a guy, Sean Rea. We had a guy, Aiden Daniels, and we had a guy, Massimo Farron, who all kind of do the same thing. They're all really good players, very skilled, very talented, but they all like to play on the left side and come in on the right foot and free up space down the left side for a left wing back to go challenge that space. Well, we can't have 3 of those guys. And when we then identified that we really wanted to add more athletic attackers to our squad as one of the real weaknesses we thought we had, guys with real pace that could really get down the lines and really attack on offense, that meant we couldn't have 3 guys out there on that wing who all played the same way. At the same time, Mass, we take heat that we don't figure out how to deal with Nimick when he leaves on a free. And here we've got Massimo, who is on an option year, which we take. But in order for him to then sign a contract for multiple years after that, we have to renegotiate. Well, Massimo is a guy who is very much a family guy, hasn't lived at home for 8 years since he's been at university, and now out here with the Wanderers, and really wanted to get home and be around his family and his dad and his mom and have them come out to every game and watch them. And that was really important for him. So he wasn't really going to commit to a long-term deal out here because he's nearing, again, unfortunately, just the way the age works, he's got a few years left, hopefully many, but you never know. And if he wants to spend the next 2 or 3 years still playing, he wants to do it in front of his family close to home. Well, we can't criticize someone for that. That's a very honest, good thing to do. And if we know that we have a surplus of guys that all kind of play the same way in the same area that we want to change anyway, we found what we felt was a win-win-win solution to sell Mass. Like, the club did get some money. He got to go to the club that was literally 5 minutes from his door, from home. And, York got a player that they were excited about that kind of fit what their model is, which is to try to bring home a bunch of guys from the Toronto area that all have CPL experience. So, we saw that as a huge win. It freed up a bunch of money for us to then go sign a bunch of exciting players that were really, keen to see how they fit in. So sorry for the super long-winded answer, but each of those situations is, you know, exactly what we face with every player every season. And it's not as simple as just, hey, Dan, you have to sign this contract for 3 more years. Like that's not the way it works, right? We have to make sure that everybody's motivated, that everybody wants to be here, that they think we're doing the best we can be doing for their career. This is the best place for them. We think they're going to help us win. We think they fit well with the chemistry of what we're trying to create for that particular team. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But that's the reality of pro sports.
Really appreciate your honesty. Like that's the thing. It's like when we don't always get to hear the background of it, and all you everybody speculates, and then it goes crazy, right? So I appreciate your honesty and letting us know what's been going on, and it is kind of difficult for everybody because you're not, as I said, you're not going to sign somebody to a 5-year contract in the CPL. It just doesn't work that way. So, Chris.
No, God, no.
Now, like Anthony said, I appreciate you kind of peeling that onion a little bit, Derek. Two well-loved guys in the community as well. So we all want to see
Great
them do
guys.
well.
Listen,
Yeah,
great,
and that's
great,
it.
great
Yeah,
guys, right? They
yeah.
were they were tremendous. They did everything we ever asked them to do when they were here. No hard feelings. They were tremendous professionals. They represented the Wanderers extremely well, as have a lot of guys. Which is then why you're even more motivated to help them find solutions that are good for them, right?
We'll get away from the club a little bit. The league as a whole, it's a transitionary time, sort of. We're moving into that pre-World Cup phase now, 2026, where I know when the league started, it was kind of circled on your guys' calendar as sort of a target date. A lot of loose, sorry, not a concrete target date, but kind of a loose target date. I know former Commissioner Clanigan was talking about 12 to 14 teams. I know it hasn't quite got to that spot yet. Uh-oh, I see the face rub, Derek. I'm sorry, brother.
Oh no, sorry, no, 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 sorry.
I know. Whenever these questions come up, I know sometimes you guys are like, "Oh, here we go again with this one." But
No, not at all.
no, and I appreciate you being an open book, man. You always are with us. When it comes to the league, I guess the big news this week was with the two potential expansion teams. I know that you probably can't tell us too much about what's going on, but sort of a jolt of energy for us who have been supporting the league from the beginning. Expansion is more opportunities, more jobs, more everything for everyone. But obviously, it requires a heck of a lot more money as well. So, from your perspective, if you can give us any update, I know I'm not trying to dig for too much information on the report that came out about that, and sort of as a follow up as well, we're in a transitionary time as well with the broadcast situation with the league. I'm not 100% privy of the details, but from what I gather, you guys, the CSB, the league, now own One Soccer. Wondering
Mhm.
what the initial steps with that development is. I see a lot of the same faces and names retained. When did that kind of conversation start, and where's that headed to as well?
Yeah, so on expansion, obviously it's a key driving force of everything we're trying to do as a league, trying to grow, trying to hit as many communities in Canada as we possibly can. We are behind where we wanted to be. None of us predicted COVID. I think COVID, I know that we don't all forget it because could we, given how traumatic it was and how much it affected everybody. Um, but I still think people don't maybe appreciate how much that set us back, um, and what that meant in terms of not just we were in survival mode as a group of clubs who form a league, which meant that the money that had been earmarked to invest in trying to grow had to be spent just on survival, and trying to get through. So, COVID lasted for 2 years, but it probably set us back 4 years. In terms of where we hoped to be and where we thought we'd be in terms of growth and expansion. That being said, there's lots of interest, and I'm actually on the expansion committee, chair of the expansion committee. Every day there's a conversation that's interesting. um, the problem is that it's really expensive to do this, and to do it right. And I think there's probably a few different scenarios that we could have jumped into and just to say we had a team and we're expanding, that wouldn't have worked out based on a number of different factors. And I'm glad we didn't. You know, we're trying to make sure that when we do expand, we've got the right group, we've got the right location for a stadium. We've got the right factors that can really help them be successful. Because, you know, the next couple of expansion sites that we move into, I think really have to work. Um, and, you know, we are close. You know, 2026 is next year now. So we've kind of adjusted our goals, and you know, I think two teams in 2026 remains the goal, the target. Two more teams in 2028, two more teams in 2030 is a kind of practical, reasonable growth rate. I think we've talked about it before on your show. You know, it's not just adding a city and trying to find thousands of new fans. It's also, you know, where do you find 23 new players, and where do you find four more referees that now have to do that game every week, and where do you find more coaches and more high performance staff and more trainers? And there's a whole ecosystem here that we all want to see grow, but you know, to grow wisely, it's got to be in a staged approach. So very confident, excited that we'll have good announcements soon around that. Soon being, you know, in the next throughout this season, that for 2026 we'll hit the ground running with a couple more teams. And in terms of the broadcast, yeah, you know, it's been shared publicly. We do own One Soccer. There's some talented people at One Soccer. They've invested a ton of time and energy in trying to build the game. A lot of those people have been retained to try to keep things as smooth as possible in the transition. And we're working on some exciting things about, you know, not just one of the things that got Canada Soccer in trouble was paying to have their games put on TSN or Sportsnet. Okay. So I think you guys have talked about this. People know about this. You know, if you devalue your product to the point where you don't think it's worth anything and you're willing to give it away, or worse, pay someone because you're so desperate for them to show it, you are never going to have any control, and you're never going to be able to kind of control your own destiny and what you're trying to do. So we have made a very difficult and expensive decision to control our broadcasts, to produce these games on our own, to show them on a channel that we are pushing the cable companies across Canada to take on as a actual channel on their network. So you don't just watch a game on a Saturday at 3 o'clock. You can tune in at any time to One Soccer and see amazing Canadian football content, as well as the content we purchase from other leagues, the French league, you know, others that are kind of coming down the pipe. It's your one-stop 24-hour a day soccer channel because we think that has a lot of value. That is a very substantive challenge to the existing way that cable companies operate. So it has been met with aggressive pushback because it's changing the business model. And, you know, I never get mad at anyone because business is business, and their business is to try to do the best they can to satisfy what their requirements are. But we're basically saying, hey, the days of, you know, us paying you to show our stuff is over. You now have to pay to get this great quality content. And it's a fight, you know, it's a battle. There's a CRTC situation going on, which has been made public. We're doing our best to make the case that, you know, this is great Canadian content that deserves a platform to be viewed by Canadians. We've got the Canadian men's national team, the Canadian women's national team. We've got the CPL. You know, there's hours and hours and hours of amazing Canadian content that we believe deserves an opportunity to be in the homes of Canadians from coast to coast. And we're going to keep fighting that fight. You know, we're already in. So there's no sense giving up on it now. And I know it's frustrating for our fans. They want to see a game on CBC or TSN every once in a while. Um, but it's not really part of the bigger picture, that of what we're trying to fight for and what we believe is going to be the most impactful for the long-term viability of soccer in this country, to kind of give up that fight now. If that does that make sense?
Yeah, makes all sense.
I'm trying not to give you guys too much of the corporate speak, but there's it's a really big deal, and it's a really substantial decision that we've made, um, as a league, to not give in on this. And it's there's no doubt that it costs us. I would love to be in any bar in the country on a Saturday afternoon and see a CPL game up on the television. Of course, that's a relevancy battle that we all want. But we've got to break this duopoly in Canadian broadcasting to be able to get to a place where it's a sustainable model. Um, and it's a grind.
It feels like snobbery, to be perfectly honest with you, that they kind of look down their nose a little bit at what you guys are trying to do compared to the MLS and stuff like that. And it's like, at the end of the day, they should be supporting. Uh, it just annoys me that when every now and again they'll put on a Canadian men's national team game or the big Canadian women's national team game, and then that's it. And there's nothing really
Yeah.
else. And you might get the odd story on like Sports Center or whatever, like about CPL, and it's not enough. I think that yeah, it's kind of a little bit embarrassing that our national broadcasters here won't take a chance on the league. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So it's hopefully.
But that's where the fans have to let their voices be heard, right? Like people need to call their cable company. They need to say, "Hey, why aren't you guys carrying One Soccer? Why can't I get it? Why can't I even add it as an extra channel on my system?" It really comes down to just pressure from consumers, because at the end of the day, they're businesses, and they don't feel any responsibility to promote Canadian athletes or sports. They're a business, and they're going to react to the people that pay the bills and what they ask for and what they want. So that's the place we have to get to, where we have a large enough voice, that they listen based on their pocketbooks, not on some false sense of Canadianism.
So, well, as I mentioned, we did get some listener questions, and one of the biggest ones that people had asked was obviously we're seeing a stadium expansion this year.
Yeah.
So what's it looking like for? Because I think it's going to be a lot of fun having that many people close to the back of the goal, and it's going to be turn us into like a little bit of a. I don't know if you know Galatasaray. They're kind of famous for having this like kind of stadium where everybody in on top of the
Yeah.
players and stuff like that. It's kind of bring that kind of a little bit people closer to the action. So what's the upgrades looking like for the supporter sections?
Yeah, listen, I think one of the things we always try to do is, how do we turn negatives into positives? And, the negative is we don't have a permanent stadium. We don't have a lot of the bells and whistles that seem to be, just accepted and should be normal. The advantage we have is that we can build the most fan-friendly, soccer-specific stadium that we possibly can. So, you know, one of the um, one of the things we were able to work through with the city this off season, finally, was getting approval to move the kitchen grandstand closer to the pitch. So the backstory there is they had thought they were building the grass field, big enough for Canadian football, but they miscalculated and built it only big enough for American football. Um, but because they had built this sand-based field, there was a border, and they didn't want us to put any heavy seating on top of what was hopefully going to be a future part of the field. So for the first 5 or 6 years, we had to keep that grandstand further back, which then created this great patio zone that we've been able to do different tier decks and tried to do whatever we could to fill it up. But we finally got approval to uh, bring the kitchen grandstand down and rebuild it 30 feet closer to the pitch, which enabled us to then make it a little bit higher and add about 500 seats into the supporter section, which we already have the best, atmosphere in the CPL. We already have the best supporter section. We already have the most intimidating place to play. And these changes are only going to amplify that by 10 times. So we've had some good meetings with our supporters groups. We've met with them individually. We're meeting with them as a total group in a couple of weeks. Really talk through how to kind of have everybody live as happily together as they can while still maintaining their own identities and being able to do what they love to do and what makes them great and makes them interesting. But we're really excited about it. I think it's something I've always wanted, is to have that kitchen right on top of the end of the pitch. I feel bad for the opposing goalkeepers. They were hearing it before, so they're going to hear it even more now. Um, and we think it's going to be great. And we were able to add 500 seats in that section. We were able to add 500 seats in the main grandstand. We've increased the capacity from 6,500 to 7,500. This is all part of the bigger picture because I've said, I made a presentation to the city council in 2023. We think there's a 10,000 seat stadium solution that makes sense on that ground, but we want to prove it, just like we've proven and put our money where our mouth was to have the first stadium there for 6,500. Let's prove that we can fill another 1,000 seats. And now to jump from 7,500 to 10,000 is not as intimidating as to jump from 6,500 to 10,000. And if we can do it incrementally and keep the atmosphere and keep the energy in the same way, if anything, improve it and make it even bigger and better, then I think we'll have done our job to continue to prove that this is the right place for a outdoor sports entertainment venue in HRM.
There's a question from Carlos, and he got upset that the last time we did one of these, I didn't ask this
Uh-oh.
question, so I better make sure I ask it. Obviously, like last year, we had uh, Cavalry play Vancouver in Kelowna. Is there any? I know they were kind of going to replicate that throughout the league, but is there anything that the Wanderers might be involved in? Because I know there was talk of like Moncton or bits and pieces about bringing the Wanderers on the road. Is that something that's in the pipeline?
So we are working on it. We are working on the on-tour concepts, continuing year over year. We think it's a great. Kelowna was a huge success. It was a great way to create excitement in a potential expansion market. It really helps with convincing the politicians and the folks that you need to be on side for a stadium to see the potential of what a CPL team can bring to a city on a consistent basis. So we are 100% working on it. We are close. We see it as a big part of our expansion planning. So, you'll see cities selected for the on tour that we believe have a great chance of becoming an expansion city in the short term future. And we are working on the Wanderers being a part of it. It wouldn't be a Wanderers home game because we're, one of the teams that does very well with our home games. But I could see us being an away team uh, in a on tour event for sure. I can say for sure it's not going to be in New Brunswick, but it's in a place that our fans could definitely make a trip to. I'll say that.
Sydney, Nova Scotia, here we come. Um,
There you
so
go. How big's your backyard? How do you have how many people do you fit back there?
it was 4 people. It's tiny. Sorry,
Yeah.
but this question was from somebody on Instagram. Do you think the volume of players in and out each year has affected consistency of performance?
Um, sure. I think it definitely has. we've also done very well on years that we brought in an entirely new group. If you actually look at 2023, when we were successful, we had a huge amount of turnover. We then didn't turn over as many. We actually tried to keep many of the same players for 2024. And that didn't work. So in a perfect world, if you have the right players, of course, I think keeping them together is going to be an advantage. We haven't won a trophy. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or not, probably. So I love sports, right? I love sports because there's a scoreboard, and the scoreboard tells you if you did it right or you did it wrong. So we haven't done it right yet because we haven't finished a season or finished a tournament or finished a type of event that has resulted in us being the last team. We've won the last game. So we have to keep trying to fix it. And yeah, Forge has been the standard bearer for our league. They've had some very consistent players that have been there, but they've been the right guys that have brought the right things to the table. And then if you really pay attention, they've actually then changed out a lot of the supporting cast around those guys pretty consistently. But because they've got the right core, that core can assimilate the new guys into it. And I think we've been searching to find that right core. Again, it's the start of a new season. We're hoping that we've got a better mix of it this year. We feel really great about the spine of our team, which is, what everyone who looks at team building says is you've got to start with the spine. And we've got, I think, one of the best spines in the CPL. Now, we've got to go prove it. And you play the games and you see what happens. And you can sit here and say everything you want about how good you think you are, but if you get out there and you lose, 10 games in a row, then obviously you weren't what you thought you were. And that's the stage we're at. So do I wish that we could have had a Kyle Becker that, was here every single year and a Tristan Borges and these guys? Sure. But we haven't won yet. So we've got to find that right mix of players that can, as I said earlier, again, it's not even about the most talented players, right? It's about the right chemistry of how the players all fit together. And, there's some talented guys that we've had to let go or that aren't coming back. It doesn't mean we don't think they're talented. They're incredibly talented. And in a different environment, in a different setup, they might have an unbelievable season. But that doesn't mean they would have had that season with us. It doesn't mean that it would have worked here because every single group has its own chemistry and how they play together. And that's the joy of trying to do this. And even if you get it right, it doesn't mean you're going to get it right next year. You got to keep doing it every single year and starting kind of over to find that right mix.
We had a couple of questions about the preseason tour that was announced. It's kind of, it's gone to the UK. I know there was talk of doing it before, and I think maybe COVID had something to do with it kind of getting nixed. But
yeah,
the kind of questions are like, are you able to tell us who you're going to be, who we're going to be playing? Is there a way to watch the games online? And why did we decide to go to UK for a tour?
Yeah. So we tried lots of things for preseason. We really haven't had any of them be successful yet. We've not had a good start to a season yet, I don't think. Again, back to my idea of how do you always turn negatives into positives, right? We're out there as it relates to all of the other teams in the CPL. We're kind of on an island. We're out pretty far to the east. We struggle to find great competition in preseason in the lead up to what we're trying to do. We obviously thought last year we had a great idea because when we knew the schedule, we knew we'd have our first two games out west. We thought, oh, wasn't this a great idea to get out west early, get everybody used to the time zone. This is going to be fantastic. We're going to win our first two games and we're going to be off to the races. Well, that didn't work out. And what we learned is that was just too long for the guys to be away. It was a grind. They were too many nights in hotel beds and in different places, and it just didn't work. So okay, we learn. We had England on the, as you said, we had England as a plan years ago. Um, because again, what's our greatest asset being way out here on the East Coast is we're actually closer to London than we are to Vancouver, which is crazy, right? But we can get over to England easier than we have a direct flight from Halifax to London. That takes us less time than to go to Vancouver. So why wouldn't we want to try to take advantage of our geography that puts us in a position to be the one team from our league that can easily get over to the mecca of this sport and be in the best facilities, play on the best pitches, play against amazing competition every single game that we get. And really put the guys in an environment that challenges them from the minute they land over there. And that is an opportunity I think is unique to us as the Wanderers. It took some work. Like I was adamant with our league that we were not going to start the season on the West Coast because we wanted to do this England preseason. But to do England preseason and to fly the guys all the way over there, we weren't then going to ask them to fly all the way back here and a week later fly all the way to the West Coast. That would have been murder on their bodies and their clock. So, we were adamant that we have to start the season in Ontario. And you guys saw the home openers came out. We play our first two games in Ottawa and in York. Well, that fits now with what we're trying to do from a preseason strategy standpoint of getting over to England and playing over there. And again, back to what we started this conversation with Matt and the work he's been doing on football development. Like the idea, it's no accident that we're bringing over these teams from the Premier League to play in our summer series. We're trying to develop relationships with teams in England that result in what we saw, what hopefully you guys noticed, is that Thiago's over training with West Ham right now.
It's awesome.
What, like, I don't know if I'm kind of, I don't know. You're right. I'm not following social anymore, but this to me is a huge deal. Like we've got a kid who's training with one of the, top teams in the world and training with their under 21s for a few weeks as he gets ready to come back and compete in the CPL season. Like it's a tremendous opportunity for Thiago. And listen, we're under no illusions. We don't think West Ham is going to pick up Thiago. Let's be realistic. But he's putting himself in a situation over there to be seen and talked about and get exposure and improve himself. Understand the level that is needed and understand the standards that 19, 20-year-old kids are being held to in those Premier League team environments. And that's invaluable to him and ultimately to us, which is why we did it. And we paid for him to go over there. And we saw it as a great part of his development. That only happens because of all these things we've been doing for the last 3 years to develop all these relationships with these different clubs. And, the teams that we're going to bring over this summer, the teams we brought over last summer we brought over Ipswich Town. That's led to some things that you're going to see in our preseason. Like we're going to play against 3 Premier League teams. They're under 21 squads, which we think is a tremendous opportunity in the immediate preparation for the 2025 CPL season. But also, what if Tavio Cicerelli scores 3 goals in the match against, I won't say it yet because we'll release that in a couple of weeks. But he scores a hat trick in one of those games. What do you think is going to happen? All of a sudden, he's on the radar of those teams, and maybe not to go to that team, but that guy knows a guy that works for a championship level team, or that guy knows somebody that works for a League One team, and all of a sudden, dominoes start to fall. And I think we just need to take advantage of that opportunity as best as we can, and specifically because it's unique to us. And I don't mind that the guys are over there. Like they don't need to go on vacation. They don't need to go down to Florida or Mexico and sit by a pool and be in the heat. They need to get over there and play against the best competition they can possibly play against to sharpen themselves to be ready to get back here and go beat Ottawa. That's the goal. The whole point of preseason is to get yourself ready to compete and win those first few games.
Amazing. I can't wait to find out who the three teams are. So this one is jersey related. So we've seen two CPL Sport Indigenous um, designs on their jerseys. Is there any scope for us to have something to do with the Indigenous community here in Nova Scotia on one of our kits?
Definitely, we've talked about it. We've looked at it. We don't have it for this year, but we are working through some different ideas. We've got some great folks involved with the club, some great folks on our DEI committee. Brady Paul, lots of good influences in terms of how to do it right. Not to do it from a commercial or marketing standpoint, but to do it in a way that's appropriate um, and impactful. So we're working through that along with some other ideas on, what's the best way to represent the community here, and it's a big part of our off-season planning. Funny enough, you're already thinking about the kits for the year that's coming up before you announce the kits and unveil. Like we're already talking about the kits now for 2026. So it's a long process, but yeah, of course, we'd love to figure that out and do it in the right way. It won't be part of this reveal that we have on March 4th, but it's something we're still working on for sure. We're really excited actually for this year. I don't know if you guys have caught wind of any of it or not, but it's quite a fun kit and something that I think our supporters will love. So
I can't wait to see. I'm looking forward to the reveals. Usually always put on a good show for the reveals too. It's kind of nice to
yeah.
see the new players and just kind of mingle and see all faces that you haven't seen since the end of the last season.
Well, I
So
got the update today. We've got 540 people RSVP'd already for an event that
wow.
is still a few weeks away. So it's a great momentum boost to kind of do something like that a month and a bit before the season starts, and then you're kind of off to the races.
You're gonna need a bigger venue.
Yeah, we've only got a few seats left.
So this kind of the last fan question because I don't want to keep you here all night. And then I'll pass back over to Chris. Let's see. So it's kind of built together. So what kind of locker room culture are we aiming to build to keep the players engaged and performing at a high level? And are there any plans for more open training sessions, meet and greets, or community events to keep strengthening the locker room with the fans to kind of keep that connection going between players and the fans?
Yeah, definitely. I think we do a pretty good job of it, to be fair. We don't take it lightly or think that it's not important. We do think it's important. So we very much try to create opportunities as much as we can while still respecting the players' need to keep a little bit of space and keep a little bit of distance. But I think the event on March 4th is a good start to that. And then pretty much every month for the rest of the season, we'll have different opportunities to engage with fans and players. And we got some fun ideas this year too. Last year, if you guys remember, we did a Rampy player card. We're going to look to expand on that concept this year and
Love
have
it.
some player cards for the whole team. And, all of those things are important. I think it's been one of my key uh, ideas, I guess I would say, from the very beginning that it is, though, about the club first. The players will come and go, as is just the way it is. At any level, but especially in this level where we're trying to bring guys along and move them on and have them develop. But when they're here, we want them to play with their hearts and give it everything they've got. And but then at the end of the day, we're all playing for the Wanderers and supporting the Wanderers, and we try to be cognizant of that in our marketing and in our things we put out there. It's not always about trying to make a player out to be a star. It's about the team and about the atmosphere at the grounds and about what this experience is all about. So we'll continue along those lines. Um, so what was the second part of your question? I got going there.
No, this case always it's just the what kind of culture are you kind of building
Oh,
and trying to
culture,
build
yeah.
in the locker room?
So yeah, I'm surprised it took us that long to get to that one because I think, if I think back to really what came out of those 3 days we spent right after the last game of the season, it was mostly about culture. Um, and we had three real priorities when it came to the player mix that we wanted for 2025. Number one was mentally tough players. Um, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at our red cards last year and realize that we lacked some mental strength, right? We let things bother us, we let things get under our skin. We as a collective, not blaming any individual, it was obvious that it was systematic because it was happening to lots of different players in lots of different situations. And it was a locker room issue. We needed to get some really mentally strong, tough people. And, I think TMG is the exemplification of that. Like he is known as a rock. And he's shown it already. He's, from the minute he signed, he started organizing team meetings and getting guys together and talking about, how we're going to be and how we're going to play and how we're going to act. And I think that stuff is, critically important. So that's our number one. Mentally tough, hard to beat, hard to break down. Yeah, we want to score pretty goals. Yeah, we want to do all those things. But number one, we just don't. We just want to not make those mistakes that give up goals in games. Number two was athletes. We had to get more athletic. We weren't that athletic last year. I think some of our problems came from not being athletic enough. Again, we played a very attractive brand of football. But when the time came to break a guy down or get past a guy or chase a guy down at the back, we sometimes faltered. So, bringing in athletes, and again, you can see that in guys like Isaiah, who is just a stud of an athlete, who will play much like Mo Omar did, and probably in a much more even athletic way that Mo was able to. That eight position and just cover a ton of ground and get himself in there. You look at guys like Johan and Jason up top. Athletes first and foremost that are going to really go at guys and put the fear of God into defenders that they're going to get behind them. And again, what people I think forget sometimes too is, I think we've got I don't know if he's the highest valued player in the league, but he's got to be up there in Sean Rea. Like he's our number one offseason signing. We just happened to sign him 10 games before the end of the season, right? Like this guy is arguably one of the top players in our league, who didn't hit the ground running after being off for a while, but now that he's had an off season and we've been able, as I said earlier, kind of free up the space where he can now play where he's most effective, not on the other side where he wasn't as effective. We have big hopes, and then Thiago's a guy that we've invested 2 years in. He's still under 21, which is crazy. He feels like he's been here forever. But Thiago's got it, man. Like Thiago, you look at his per 90 minutes production, he's up there. And he's got the potential and he's got the energy and he's got the drive and he's got the attitude that we all love, and I think for him it's just this year it all coming together to be healthy and to feel confident and to know that he can do it. And then the third thing was fit. And I think with us, again, Patrice plays such a unique system, with this 3-box-3 where, we don't need the same types of players that other teams need. And when you have them, it actually kind of makes things difficult. And I'll give you an example, okay? Because I know you guys, know our guys and love our guys. But you look at like last year, we had Wes and Zach, right? As two very talented fullbacks. Both are really better at going forward than they are at playing defense, right? We can all agree that.
Yep.
Well, it's really difficult in Pat's system to have those two guys that do that, because he really needs one of those fullbacks to play like a center back. And, guys were saying last year, oh, you guys are trying to play three at the back. Well, that's just the way he plays. It's just sometimes you don't notice that the right back or the left back is usually just staying at home while the other guy bombs down. And then you've got your forward tucking in to play kind of like two tens up at the top. So when we look at our roster composition, we can't really have two guys that do that are, high quality, high cap hit players, because then we're not really putting them in the best position to succeed. And you saw that with West last year. Like, Wesley's really a forward more than he's a left back, but he's a pretty good wing back. But if you ask him to just stay home all the time and play like a left center back, he's not going to be in a position to be super successful. Same with Zach. If you ask Zach to stay home and play like a right center back, that's not what Zach wants to do. That's not what his skill set is. He's a guy that needs to bomb down there, get in the mix, be offensive, almost play like a winger, which is why you saw him sometimes playing as a winger in Pat's system, because that was what suited his skill set. So, finding the right fit for all of these guys means that sometimes we're not going to sign, our squad's not going to look like, you're not going to say, oh, there's your left back who likes to go down the line. There's right back that likes to go down the line. There's your stay at home center backs. Sometimes our guys are going to be a little bit more fluid than that, because they have to fit our system. And again, this comes back to, you don't always need to sign the 11 most talented players and put them on the pitch together. You have to find the 11 guys that fit together the best, that complement each other, that don't try to compete to get into the same spaces on the pitch, that then hopefully it all comes together and it works. So that was really kind of our focus on, the locker room was a huge focus for us, and finding, the right players that fit in the system, that were the right athletes, but then had that mental fortitude to fight through the inevitable low points, right? No matter how good we are, no matter how well we do, we're going to have a bad patch. And how you fight through that bad patch is what defines your season, and whether you can kind of be there at the end, successful or not.
I feel like you've been spending way too much time with Gary, because you're talking about 3-box-3, floating tens and people coming inside and all that kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah, I've learned.
I know
I've learned. Yeah.
Honestly, it's amazing though. Like, from the guy that we knew when all this started, who was like, I'm not a soccer guy, to like now you're talking fluently in the language. It's great that you've really taken it all to your heart. So it's great to hear. Chris, far away there, buddy. Sorry, I had to get all the listener questions out of the way there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, these are good.
And I only really had like 1.5 questions really myself anyways. And one of them, you kind of gave us some behind the scenes details when it came to Dan and Mass, regarding somebody who you guys retained actually this offseason, which in a way it almost kind of feels like the signing of the season, you could argue league wide, retaining Lorenzo Caligari. I guess just maybe give us you don't have to dig in too deep, but just kind of give us a around the end kind of idea of how those negotiations went, and maybe from the horse's mouth, how stressful was it for you, or was it an easy process? It was just a matter of dotting some I's and crossing some T's.
Yeah, I don't think it was stressful. Again, same philosophy applied that I went through earlier with Dan and Mass, right? At the end of the day, Lorenzo has served our club extraordinarily well. He's competed his butt off every single time he's stepped on the pitch wearing our jersey. We have nothing but good things to say about him and his. He's a great guy to deal with. He causes no problems. He's a great team guy. He's a dream, and he's a very talented footballer. So just like with Mass and Dan, as a person and as a player, he's somebody that we started talking to in the summer last year, and started, talking about the future and how much we'd love to have him back, and how much we saw him as a big part of what we were trying to do and trying to build here. And he, like anyone in his position should, wanted to look at his options and wanted to consider it. And he's got a girlfriend in France who he had been apart from and had family back there that he hadn't seen in a long time. And it's a process that I think every athlete owes it to themselves to, when they have earned that opportunity, and maybe given up a little security, to take their chance at looking around and seeing what's available. They should do. I have no problem with that. Um, it's always a trade-off, right? Like, if we want to, we have decisions to make about whether we want to commit long term or not, just like the athlete has decisions to make whether they want to take the long-term security or they want to bet on themselves and see what's going to happen. This is the reality of how this stuff works. And Lorenzo asked to have a little bit of time to go back home, to talk to his family, to talk to his partner, to figure out what they wanted to do. And we said, okay, we'll give you some time, but we kind of put a deadline on that time in early January, to say, take the end of the year, see what happens after Christmas, and let's talk again in January and see. We had a few options in case it didn't work out. So that's why I said I wasn't stressed out. We could have went a different direction. It would have been a very dramatic, maybe different direction. It could have been a different position, or it could have been some different things. But we had scenarios that we could have played out. But we were happy when he called and said, "Yeah, I've taken my time. I've really thought about it, and I want to come back. And I want to come back for multiple years and make this. Want to go win a championship with you guys." And that was fantastic. And we made it happen, and we made it work. And that then led to a couple of other, you noticed a couple other French guys that all of a sudden Lorenzo became one of our recruiters and wanted to help us get to that point where, he brought a few guys that he thought were really, really good and that he had played against that he thought would make us better. And, that's how it all happened. But, once that decision was made, then that kind of had a knock-on effect on a bunch of other things. And we're really happy that he made that decision. And now we're kind of tied at the hip with him for a couple of years to really take a run at this.
He's an immensely talented player, and I'm not even just saying it because he's ours, but there's like genuine, and I mean the term world class gets overused just so much, but there's genuine parts of his game that reminds me of watching what I used to watch on television growing up. And to have that here and to have him want to be a part of this story as well is just so special. And that's why I said, like, as much as there's signings coast to coast, guys moving clubs, big names here and there, retaining sometimes in a league that's difficult to retain players, given the cap situation, given the ambitions of the players. The fact that you guys were able to keep Lorenzo is a huge win. And I think I speak on most supporters saying bravo. My last question, we live in Halifax. It's a growing city. There's no question. We've got all kinds of different issues in this city in terms of growth. And then we also have things missing, the stadium being one of those things. But you were talking earlier about, you get your corporate sponsorships and stuff settled. You get that stuff out of the way as soon as you possibly can. So it's one less burden, on the plate once the season begins. For as fast as and much as Halifax has been growing, it's no secret also that there is kind of that limited marketing and that limited sponsorship potential and space here in Halifax and in Nova Scotia in general. We're kind of moving into, like, I call it the second phase of the club's history, but you can really call it the third because, like you said, COVID was such a huge and difficult thing for you guys to get over that it changed a lot of your plans and it changed a lot of your focuses. As we're moving now into, I guess in your case, it would be year 8 of this development of this plan, maybe even year 9.
Yeah.
And you're moving into a space now where there's a new seat at the table, for example, in terms of grabbing different marketing opportunities in different businesses. How do you kind of envision and see that future over the next few years? And I know the stadium is a huge part of that. I know you spoke about that earlier. That seems to be a huge building point and sort of staple for what can be the future and the success and the stability of the club. But from that perspective of making sure that the club is successful off the field as it's been for the last 7 years, what's the direction, I guess? Where's the whimsy coming from? Because I know it could probably get a little bit mundane and a little bit repetitive, kind of doing the same things every year. I asked you earlier, it's kind of the same kind of question, what keeps you motivated? But I guess in a way, how are you kind of reinventing your mind from a business perspective, given that you've been a businessman for as long as you've been?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, I think there's tons of opportunity that we have still only scratched the surface of. I do think we've done a great job. I take great pride in that. I think we've got a great team of people, both those that have kind of moved on from us, who have helped lay the foundation for all of this, and also those who are still with us and those that are joining us. Um, we're attracting great people, which is always a good sign, that want to come work with us and want to come help us continue to build this thing. But I certainly never take it for granted. I think uh, building something like this is a living organism, a team, a soccer club. Uh, it's all about Marvin. Marvin would, if he was listening to this, he'll laugh when I say this, but I used to always tell him it's all about momentum. And momentum is such a fickle thing, and you can lose it like that. And um, I wake up every day, I go to sleep every night. I stress about the little things. I don't like little things going wrong. I don't like there being tiny little cracks in the foundation, because I really truly believe that part of why we're successful, and people ask me this all the time, and a lot of the other clubs in the league that might be struggling, new clubs, how do you do it? What's the magic? What's the magic thing we can do to get the success that you have in Halifax? And my answer, unfortunately, is disappointing to them, because I say we've been building this for the last 8 years. You know, I think back to the very first time that the news broke that we were looking to transform the Wanderers grounds into a stadium, before the CPL existed, before the Wanderers existed. And there was a group of guys who reached out to me to meet for a beer because they were soccer fans and wanted something to happen in their city. You know, some of those guys are still part of our group. Some of those guys are still fans. And it started there, and it's just been this continual, like, step by step by step by step by step process, to get us to where we are today. But it could all just as easily start to unravel the other way, and we could take steps backwards and down. So that's what motivates me, is to keep trying to innovate, making these changes to the stadium, adding in new zones, adding in new areas. I'm never afraid to fail, and look stupid or be criticized by trying something, because if we don't try, then we'll never know if it was a good thing or not. And that's what I think attracts corporate sponsors. I'm proud to say we have a business awards in our league. You might have seen that, and every year we win. We have the highest sponsorship in the league in one of the smallest markets. We have the highest ticket sales in one of the smallest markets. Um, because we're finding creative ways to not just go sell something, but to try to create something with a partner. And we've got a couple of new zones going into the Wanderers grounds this year. We're looking to launch, you guys will get the exclusive, but we're looking to launch an all-inclusive club where you buy a ticket and all your food and drinks are included. Well, that's never been done before, right? That's not existed. It doesn't exist at the Scotiabank Center. It doesn't exist here, but we're going to try it, and it might fail miserably, and people might say that's the stupidest thing. I'm never going to pay that money to go in there. And it might not. But we're going to try it, and we're going to see. And we're going to create a Rovers Kids Club zone that has a little bit more interactive stuff for the kids and the families, and we're going to try those things because we want to, and we want to be innovative, and we want to find unique ways that I truly think one of the reasons we're successful, maybe the biggest reason we're successful, is that because we were able to design a stadium from scratch, we were able to create so many different unique zones where your experience in that zone is very unique and different to the experience somebody is having in a different zone. Um, And that is critical, I think, to fan experience and the reason people want to go. And you two guys, I know you guys sit in different areas. You experience the game in different ways. That's great. That's the way it should be. And maybe Anthony would not want to be where you are, Chris, and maybe Chris, you wouldn't want to be where Anthony is, but it works for you guys. And the guys that are in 108 that are jumping up and down and lighting off smoke bombs and singing songs, maybe they have their back to the action the whole game because they're too worried about trying to get everybody going. And that's their experience. And the people that are in the corporate suites half the time don't even know what's going on, but they're having a great time because they're seeing people they know. And that's all good. Like there's no judgment on how someone wants to enjoy their experience. Everybody gets to do it the way they want to do it. And, I think we can never lose that. And if anything, we have to keep trying to find more and more ways that, we can introduce the sport to new people. Again, sorry, I'm ranting here. You guys got me on a good night, but I always say, like, the hardest, you want to know the hardest group we had to convince during the first 3 or 4 years to be Wanderers fans? Do you know who they were?
Me and Chris.
The people that considered themselves real soccer fans,
Ah.
right? I used to hear all the time, oh, you guys aren't, oh, you guys are shit. This isn't quality. This is going to be crap. This is no good. This is, I can watch, I watch Premier League. I see the best soccer. We used to hear that all the time. And what we would say is, yeah, we're not trying to be that. Like I agree. You can see much better players when you watch, I won't say the names of the teams because I don't want to get you guys mad, but whoever the teams are in the Premier League, of course they're better. Of course, we're not pretending like we're better. But what you don't get is this shared experience of being in a stadium and hearing the crowd erupt when there's a goal, or hearing everybody boo the referee when they pull out a red card, or you don't get that on when you sit at home and watch it on TV, or even when you go in a bar and you watch it on TV. So that's what this experience is all about. And this is your, and you get to have that with your buddies or with your son or with your daughter or with your friend or whomever. This is what you're going to get. And eventually that group came around, right? And now you see them and they're like, oh, this is the greatest. Yeah, this is awesome. But that was a difficult nut to crack. That this isn't about watching, the very, very, very best. It's about having the best experience that you can possibly have. And I think that's one of the areas we've done a good job on, and one of the things we have to keep working on to continue to evolve and make better. Because that's what brings people back, right? That's what, and look, we've proven it. As much as it pains me that we haven't won, we continue to. This year was our highest ever season ticket retention ever.
Amazing.
Right? We had a disappointing year by all accounts. Nobody thinks it was a success on the pitch. Nobody does. None of us do. It wasn't what we wanted. But I still believe that most, 93% of people that renewed their season tickets had a fun enough time that they really wanted to come back, and they're holding out hope that we keep getting better and that they get to enjoy those wins and they get to enjoy that experience of lifting a trophy. So we'll continue to do that. Again, Chris, sorry, long answer to a very smart question, but I think we're, by continuing to innovate and continuing to think long and hard about how we create a fantastic experience, it makes corporate sponsors really want to work with us and find ways that they can, engage with not only customers but with their staff, and that their staff are proud to be affiliated with the Wanderers and the fun times that they have when they're there and that their clients have. That's the magic sauce.
Yeah, it's kind of like back in Ireland, they're seeing like a huge uptick in local fans going to local clubs. Like the Irish League is like a very small league in a kind of big pond, but it's like the Premier League has priced themselves over so much that people are starting to flock just for that experience of being around other people and enjoying the game and kind of getting back to the grassroots of it all. And I think that's been one of the big things for me is that it's obviously what happens on the pitch and in the club matters a lot to me because I want us to win. But at the same time, though,
Yeah.
you kind of forget all that when you hit on a Saturday and you see your friends and you're having a couple of beers behind the goal and just, it is a very unique experience. And I think one of the big things for the Wanderers too is it's the people that go tell everybody they know you should go. And once people get that hook into them and you go for 1 or 2 games, and it's just the community just kind of drives it forward. So that's why we're probably going to see the extra capacity be filled out again this season. So just before I let you go, Derek, I did promise somebody would ask me a question. There's a guy called Sam Wang who's like an amazing football fan here in the city. So he's he'd like to ask you a couple of questions on behalf of the local Chinese football fans. We have a strong football loving community here, but we're also keen to get more involved in the development of our local professional team. Every year, the local Chinese community organises football-related events, including an annual Chinese Football League, which is now in its 20th edition. I'd like to ask whether the club has any plans to increase engagement with minority communities and if there are ways to encourage more participation from Chinese fans in the team's development.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm disappointed we haven't already engaged with Sam and his group. I think we've tried certainly very hard to engage with as many diverse communities as we can. We've had diversity and inclusion nights. We've done our New Canadians night. We try really hard to work through as many of those opportunities as we can. But I think the Chinese group, the football league that they have, we'd love to talk to them and figure out how we can support what they're trying to do and get them involved throughout the season and all the games, but also maybe there's something we can do specifically around a Chinese theme or something. I know we did a promotion last year, which I thought was quite cool, where we actually did posters
Yeah, I love that.
up around the city, and I think we picked the 7. We use Google, but I think we Googled the 7 most spoken languages in Halifax and did up posters in those 7 languages. And I believe Mandarin was one of them.
Not to cut you off, Derek, that was super successful because I cannot tell you the amount of people that were reposting those posters, posting them on Reddit, posting them on Twitter. The couple ended up in our Facebook group, and like the genuine excitement of somebody of a diverse community seeing this poster in their language, it like even if they were already going to games, it was just like, okay, they are listening to me. So it's actually kind of cool that Anthony had this question from Sam.
That's a great question. Yeah, I agree. I'm really glad he wrote in, and we'll continue that, and even for the home opener, we'll maybe bring that back and make sure there's great engagement around all the different languages. And I go back to, I think one of the factors of our success is I think soccer as a sport, football really represents the changing face of Halifax, and not to put down our friends at the Mooseheads. They do a great job. I think there's always going to be a great place for them. And but the reality is when you go to a Mooseheads game and you look around at the faces you see in the bowl of the arena, and you go to a Wanderers game and you look at the faces you see around the stadium, it's 2 different sets of faces. And that's important, and I don't think we can ever take that lightly. We really represent the new Halifax and where Halifax is going. And it's a sport that is so easy to understand and has a familiarity for immigrants, especially. It really makes it a great way to introduce yourself to the city. So thanks for that question. I'll take that back and see what we can do to reach out to Sam and his group to get them to a game and get them involved.
Awesome. Well, Derek, once again, I really appreciate you being open and honest. And answering the questions that a lot of people would try to avoid, or like send me a message after and say, "You asshole for asking me that question." So
Listen, I think maybe what people don't appreciate is this is all good, right? Like I wouldn't be in this business if I had a thin skin and I was too concerned about dialogue and discussion. And not to say I'm encouraging it, but you know, listen, every part of what makes you relevant as a sports team is having people talk about you. And you're not going to win every game, so you're not going to always be talked about in the most positive way. But I try to tell some people who maybe are a little bit more sensitive than I am to always appreciate that being talked about is better than not being talked about. And we obviously want to be as engaging as we can and say, I try to be anyway, and try to answer what I can without getting myself or others into trouble. But I think the transparency is important, and you guys give up a lot to support the team, and whether it's your time, it's your money, it's your passion, it's your commitment, and the least we can do is to try to share as much as, or at least I can do is, share as much as I can and give you guys a bit of a glimpse into, the reality of the fact that we do think about a lot of these things, and we don't just do things without giving it thought or having a plan. The plan might not be wrong and the plan might not work out, but there is always a plan. And I'm really looking forward to the day the plan comes together.
That was it. So we've had like an 18 quote and we've had an Oscar Wilde quote in the last 30 seconds. It's probably a first for down the pub, so I really appreciate that. Chris, thank you so much for all the great questions as always. Derek, yeah, it's I love doing these because it kind of pumps us up for the season and kind of makes it feel real that we're kind of getting back into the nitty gritty. And
I think this is now an annual pod, right? We'll have to do this in February of every year just to set the table.
Yeah, exactly. So Derek, I really appreciate it. Chris, I really appreciate it, and see you soon. Come on, you Wanderers.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Take care.
You're the man, Derek. Thanks, brother.
Right foot, please. Time to drink up, folks. Get out. Out to book.